Welcome to episode 121. Today's topic, why is humor so important? Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. Welcome back. As always, I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
And we are here today to talk about the importance of humor and stories. But this is a very serious topic, so I'm going to start right off the bat and say there will be no joking. This is straight to business.
Yeah, the problem is, though, you said we're here today to talk about humor, and before I arrived, you told me we were going to talk about underwater basket weaving in foreign countries. So
because that's the sort of mindset I need you to be in to talk about
but my
humor.
point is that now you've got me totally thrown, and now that you're saying that we can't joke at all, I can't point out that you're wearing those big bobbly eyeglasses and bunny ears on your head, which is kind of distracting.
Well, just be glad that the table blocks your view of my pants. Or
I'm very glad the table blocks my view of your pants, or lack thereof. So, why is humor important?
Well, ultimately, there's many different definitions of humor out there, and I'm not going to bore you with the quotes of people who know what they're talking about. But humor is really it's an alternate way that people interact with their environment, the stimulus. You know, it is the way people interact in real life. So when you're storytelling, you need to try and capture that. Use that to your advantage. Really, when you think about humor, a lot of times people think about comedies, which are usually just sort of like dramas at different paces. You know, not always, but many comedies, that's essentially how they work, is the straight person comes in and is delivering lines at a different cadence than the comedic person, and it sounds funny and people laugh and respond. We're not talking about writing comedy. It's definitely not a skill of mine, even though I joke around a lot. It's about using humor as a powerful tool in your arsenal of writers' weapons.
Can I give you an analogy that might help? I like to look at what you can do with a story like a roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
So a roller coaster is not exciting and exhilarating because it does one thing. It's because it does a thing and then stops doing a thing, or it doesn't do a thing and then starts doing a thing.
Yeah.
So when you're clicking up that roller coaster and it's going higher and higher and higher, that's the calmness of a story. That's the quiet. That's or it's the tension of the story building and building and building. And then when you have a big thing occur and you get to the top of the roller coaster and all of a sudden all kinds of crazy business occurs and it's exciting and scary and terrifying. And that's the adrenaline moment. But when you get down to the bottom, it levels out. And you couldn't enjoy it as much if it didn't level out.
Yeah.
You know, and a story's like that. You have to have ebbs and flows. You have to have an up and down to it. So good drama and good tension, it's really hard to maintain tension throughout the entirety of a novel and have that be enjoyable.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. There's definitely some books that do it. I'm immediately reminded of Stephen King's The Running Man or Richard Bachman's The Running Man. Pretty much that whole book is very tense.
Yeah.
It's very paranoia. It's an experiment in paranoia if you read that book. But the point is that very few books manage to do that. And what's, more enjoyable for a reader is build that tension, build that tension, build that tension, then release. Build that tension, then release. And humor does that very well, especially in drama.
Yeah. And we'll get more into that when we get down to supports the story. Because there's some very important techniques that you need to think about when you're trying to use humor. Because if you alleviate too much, there was a classic British TV show called How to Irritate People.
Was I on it?
No, it was John Cleese, shockingly. And essentially, the major point of it is the art of irritating someone really is the art of bugging them, but not making them tip over in rage, because once they do that, the irritation's gone. So
you push too far.
The trick is you keep pushing too far, but then when they're at the edge, you pull back some, and so that's, irritation is much, another version of humor that you can use as a tool to sort of change the pacing, bring the tension down some. There are other things you can do too. Like, it's like when the detective finds a big clue in a detective story that's leading him towards the horrible killer. That relieves some tension because you're like, okay, we're closer now. We're closer now. And then.
But that could also build the tension more because the danger's getting closer too.
Well, it depends a lot.
Depends on the delivery.
The dynamic of the story. But sometimes finding that clue getting closer, think of your Law and Order episodes in a procedural cop show like that. You feel like, okay, we're getting close to nailing this scumbag. And
what if he's just misunderstood, Jeff?
But you're supposed to think he's a scumbag because that's the way he's written.
Okay. Do you want to talk a little bit about how humor shows up in your book, the forthcoming Steward's Son?
No,
not now.
No, not now. However, what I do want to talk about is...
You get that was just an excuse for me to plug your book. Okay.
Yes. The big thing is here, humor is actually considered a very powerful thing in people's lives. There are a lot of studies that will actually show that people who laugh more live longer. And there's some belief, and I don't know how much because I don't study it enough, but there's definitely some belief out there that humor is more powerful than being obese. It's more powerful than smoking, or maybe not quite, but it's in that level of influence on someone's health. However, I don't really want to go into every reason why.
No, that was,
all of the benefits. But the biggest one, and it fits along the line of relieving tension, is it relieves stress. Because tension causes stress. And when it's in a novel, they're looking for it, and stress is not always bad. People are looking for certain types of tension.
When you say
types of genre.
When you say stress isn't always bad, do you mean for a person or for a story?
For a person.
For a person, stress isn't always bad.
Stressors are considered changes.
Okay.
So you moving to your dream house would be a stress, but it's a positive stress.
Okay, I get you.
You being evicted from your dream home and moving into a shack, basically in the north end of Torrington. Oh my goodness. Really tough neighborhood.
I'd say Torrington's not bad. What are you talking about?
They don't know. No one.
Okay,
listens.
Gotcha. No one.
They don't have.
We want people to listen.
They don't have the internets in Torrington.
What if don't listen to Jeff? Like the World Builders Anvil does not condone its hosts' opinions on Torrington.
Actually, he's just a fiction writer, and he lies.
It's true. Or is it?
Well, actually, I do work with 3 guys from Torrington, so
Gotcha.
I have due cause.
Interesting justification. What I did want to mention is actually just, I think it was last week, I was thinking something that I love about this show is that it basically gives us an excuse to get together once a week and laugh at each other. We laugh a lot making this show.
It was like 2 weeks ago in real life time, which is not quite the same as people listening to it time.
Right.
Layoffs started where I worked. And so there's been lots of tension where different parts of the organization have been being hit, little bits here, little bits there for the past 2 weeks now.
Just stressful.
It's very stressful. I've had friends, my original user, the first person I teamed up with from the business side to create an app on my own, gone.
How long have you been working with that person?
About 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah. There was a director, 60 years. He was 60.
He was 60.
I believe he'd worked for the state for over 30 years, gone. We lost someone who I thought was a help desk worker where I worked, gone. 27 years, because they technically were working out of class and they got rid of the whole class. So she had to go with 27 years. Too young to receive the pension that people work for. So,
oh my God, don't you need 30?
It's not the years.
It's your age.
So it's whatever the retirement age of the organization is. If you have a privatized one, like a 401k,
will she have?
It's 59 and a half.
Will she have earned a pension by the time she's that age?
Yes.
On this job?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Most jobs, whenever you start earning a 401k, would be the same time you would earn a pension.
Mm-hmm.
It would just be minuscule at that point. And over time, they have these really complex formulas that you don't understand that explain what the actual output value will be. Mm-hmm. But it's usually like your 3 best years and it's something to do with the years of service. But yeah, we'll get back here. But yeah, so we actually recorded that Thursday and I needed to because, we got to BS around a little bit and I could forget it for a moment. Mm-hmm. And that's really what I was getting to. So there was like real life stress released with just the humor of the conversation. And I think we're talking about gaming too, which is something we both loved that week. Mm-hmm. I wasn't at that because I think that's what the episode was.
I don't know. I think that there was probably a lot of off mic laughter that day too, because I know we were going back and forth at each other. But but that's one of the things I love about the show is it. At first, I thought it was just going to be I knew we'd have a good time recording it, but I didn't think we'd have so much laughter.
Yeah,
and a lot of times and Jeff's got a lot of stuff that he'll be putting in some sort of episode for you guys special at some point where. We're just screwing around and we're either making each other laugh or one of us is trying. Most of the time it happens during the intro. One of us is trying to seriously record the intro and the other person is just on the other side of the table screwing with him, making lewd, gestures and but being quiet just to get the other person to laugh so they screw up their intro.
Or it'll sometimes backfire where the person will still nail the intro, then when the other person has to start speaking, they're
laughing. Yeah.
Because, but no, there's a lot of good stuff. At some point, I just warn people now. It'll probably be a highly explicit.
I know.
Michael's a potty mouth.
Not the only one, but I thought you were going to do 2 of them. I thought you were going to do one, which was an episode of just our screw ups, so just our our flubbing our words and what have you, and then another one that was going to be just all of our explicit.
No, I think I'll
mash it together,
just whatever order they happen in.
Yeah.
When I can get about 15 minutes of good content.
Yeah,
I'll do that.
15 minutes. I'm sure we can get a lot more than that.
Well, we do, but part of it sometimes I'm really rushed, so I can't always grab stuff, and sometimes I have 8 minutes from the last couple episodes we've done.
Right.
There's been a lot of stuff I cut out at certain parts.
But the big point here is that Jeff and I both have stressors in our lives, and this show is a great alleviator because of the humor.
Yeah, and that goes to the point where humor, where it also benefits life itself. We don't care about all of those things. We really want to look at the relieving nature of it because that's where it's the most beneficial in storytelling. There's a problem too if you don't use humor. It will not feel natural to someone reading your story or interacting with your story. Because when people have tough times, and not everyone is the class clown, but when you watch movies with like the clown, the army platoon where they're in the middle of World War II and everything's horrible and little Freddie just got shot and he was the youngest guy in the platoon and everyone feels bad. And there's the guy, he's the Joker. He's the guy who keeps the platoon's morale up in those moments through the humor. He says something probably inappropriate, not at the moment they find the kid, but at an appropriate moment a little bit later. And it will help relieve the tension and let them stay focused to the task at hand.
Yeah, it's the purpose of breaking levity.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things with that, too, is a lot of things affect you physiologically.
A great example of this for me, like a real easy, quick reference example of this is watch Firefly. Whenever things get tense on Firefly and in Serenity, Wash is usually shooting a comment in there. So there's this tense argument and they're all talking about how, whether or not River and Simon should stay on the ship and Jane is saying a bunch of horrible things. And then, Kaylee's like, nobody is saying that you should leave the ship. And Wash immediately follows it. Nobody but Jane is saying that you should leave the ship, So things like that, things where you have a character that not necessarily that's their sole purpose, but it's one of their jobs.
Yeah.
And without that job, it just pulls away from the rest of the story because it doesn't feel as complete without that. It's a level of humanity.
And think about this too. Have you ever been tickled? And this means a lot if you're ticklish, because you start laughing, but if they keep tickling you in the same way, the tickling loses its effectiveness. And the reason is because you get used to the stimulus. And humor creates a physiological response in people. And it will do the same to these fictional characters as well, too. So humor, without humor, tension stops increasing automatically. Because if you're trying to create something really, really tense, if you only use things to make it more tense, humor is something that can break up to bring the mood down a little bit so then you can push the tension higher. Otherwise, you'll get up to a peak and it will flatline. It'll feel like a very one-note kind of story, as you hear a lot when they talk about food and cooking shows. It becomes one note if there's really one type of thing that you're doing emotionally to people in the story.
Because the thing here is like when you're building that tension, you're building that tension, and then you break it a little bit with humor. You're basically giving the reader a little break. But what you're not doing is undoing all the tension you've created. You're creating a little pause for it. You haven't lowered that tension. You've just stepped sideways from it for a moment. And when you start building again and building again, the reader's ready to follow you on that journey again, but you're building it higher.
Mm-hmm.
Each time, if you do it correctly, you're building it higher. So then you get to your big climaxes of like, so-and-so killed so-and-so, or finally we've reached Shangri-La, or, whatever it may be.
One of the things to keep in mind, too, is with physiological responses, they're not controlled, consciously. There are many examples from World War I that created a big question in the minds of scientists. When troops would go over top of the trenches to charge the other side, they were almost always mowed down by machine guns. It was the nature of the war. And so they would find several bodies with what they call a cadaveric spasm, which is like...
Say that slower, please.
A cadaveric spasm, which is like rigor mortis instantly happening, where really it takes 24 hours for it to kick in. There's a spasm that can happen at the moment of death that causes a complete rigidity. And one of the most common things they would find in soldiers crossing over top would be an erection. And it was not obviously because they were sexually aroused at the thought of going to kill other people. It is physiologically being scared and being sexually aroused are very similar, which in a way is kind of creepy. This is something interesting about humans, but it's also why you want to go to see horror movies with your date.
Well, yeah, but what if you don't want to have a big old erection while on that first date?
I don't understand.
I think part of your advice might be ill-advised here.
I don't get it. Okay.
So you want her to have a big erection is what you're saying.
Well, women actually have their own forms of such things.
Yeah, I know, which is why I just said it.
Yeah.
I read a book or two. I know a bit about biology.
Well, let me show you what I call a documentary on the internets later.
I've seen a couple on this subject. The point that Jeff is trying to make is that being afraid and they're so closely tied together because and it comes up with humor and tension. I'm losing my train of thought. The basic gist is like you get afraid and you need that tension break, which is why there's a lot of great humor in good horror movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like watch any good horror movie. Look at Scream. Scream's a perfect example. The whole Scream series. Mm-hmm. Scary, scary, scary. Funny.
Yeah.
Scary, scary. Funny.
Nightmare on Elm Street, another beautiful example. I think
very good one. Very good one.
And bad slasher movies, what they will do is they will only rely on what's the other thing that they use? Shock and awe. The cat that jumps out instead of the killer's sword.
Jump scares.
Like and it gives you a moment of relief, and then they poke the guy in the eye with, an arrow. I guess it was a horror movie with Legolas as the villain.
Well, I think you might be referring to the very first Friday the 13th.
There's one with kind of the throat.
Right, that was Kevin Bacon. That was Kevin Bacon.
Our show's now connected.
To everything. We're connected to everything.
Everything now.
Our show just got connected.
Good job. Michael gets extra pay today.
Nice. Which is
double
zero. 2 times 0, still 0. In the very first Friday the 13th movie is not there's no humor. It's just scary. Mm-hmm. It's scary. Well, some of it might be humorous now, but it wasn't delivered that way.
It wasn't delivered that way, but it should have been. That was the failure of the movie, and they I think stuck with it. I was never impressed with the series.
Did you watch the first one?
Yeah, when it came out when I was a kid,
with his mother.
I don't remember that part of it, to be honest.
The first Friday,
I might have fallen asleep during.
The first Friday the 13th was not Jason; it was his mother.
Oh no, I did not see that one. No.
Oh, dude, it's good.
Okay.
So the story is there was a Camp Crystal Lake. Mm-hmm. There were kids there. Jason was kind of a special needs kid. He was out in the lake swimming, and the counselors were not paying attention to him because they were all grooving on each other. So they were, getting sexy with each other. Mm-hmm. And because of their promiscuity, Jason drowned.
Oh, okay.
So his mother...
Which leads to why they're always the target.
Well, so his mother... So a few years later, they go to reopen the camp, and now there's all these new counselors, and his mother goes there, and she starts killing all the counselors because she's getting vengeance because counselors in general, using air quotes, not these particular counselors, allowed her child to die because of sexual promiscuity. That's why that became a thing in horror movies, because there was like, oh, you're being sexy, you die. And that's when Scream goes off on, like, you can't have sex in a horror movie, you get killed. That's why. So the first one was really, it was a good movie.
Yeah.
Now, and I will stand by, the rest of them are good movie too, but for very different reasons.
Yeah, but for me, I've enjoyed a lot of horror movies. Very few of them have actually created horror fear in me. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, it's they don't choose the same types of elements that my brain needs. Mm-hmm. When I read horror, I can be scared, but watching it very rarely works. Unless it's like The Omen, that one creeped me. Things with Into the World religious themes.
First Omen was really good.
Those kind of horror movies kind of bug me. But
it's all for you. It's all for you, Damien.
That moment
was terrifying.
Terrifying moment.
Going back to Friday the 13th for a second, if you watch Jason vs. Freddy, that is a great one with humor and frights.
Okay.
Not that the frights are like really, really scary, but they do a good job building some tension in there, and they also have a lot of levity breaking in that movie too.
Yeah.
So that's another great.
Well, Freddy was designed for the levity breaks.
Well, he wasn't originally though. In the first one, he was not funny. That evolved. Robert Englund brought that to the character. By the third or fourth movie, he had
moments.
Funny.
He had moments within them, but it was more natural where it became exaggerated as it went on.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things to keep in mind is there are two ways to deliver the humor. You can go over the top where you'll bring the tension down a lot, or you can do it a little bit, which will just bring down the tension a little bit. Speaking of Freddy, the important thing about humor is it helps you connect better with characters. So you feel really connected with Freddy Krueger in those movies as he's killing all of those, don't you?
Well, the irony is that, they later had Freddy dolls and like Robert Englund.
Everyone
they totally broke the fourth wall in, I think, the fifth or sixth movie, where it's like the movie within the movie. So in points of the movie, Robert Englund is playing Robert Englund, reflecting on playing Freddy Krueger.
Okay.
Like, it's very, very meta. The new, I think it was the new Nightmare, Wes Craven's.
Okay. When they brought it back the second time. Yeah.
And they talk about in it, and because I've watched the whole document. I've watched it's like 2 hours and 2.5 hours long, this documentary all about the Nightmare on Elm Street series. Not the television show series, though. They do talk about that, but the movie series. And they talk about how weird the franchise was because children, not just teenagers, children knew who Freddy Krueger was. And they're like, how do these kids know who this character is? One, he appealed to kids because he's a boogeyman and he targets children.
Yeah.
But there was also this weird relationship that kids had with Freddy where they know he's fake and they would come with their dolls and like Freddy dolls. And it's like children with Freddy dolls. Freddy Krueger is a child molester. And then child mass serial murderer.
But besides that, he's a nice guy.
We gravitate towards him, and humor. I think you're totally right. Is a big part of it. Mm-hmm.
I think his character might be one of the best examples of that because it's one character you should not identify with. It's like Jason, you don't identify with. At least I didn't. Freddy, you do.
I think if you knew the full story, you might identify with.
Well, I was never picked on.
You were never picked on as a kid?
Not once.
Come on.
Not once. Not one time.
Were you the bully? You were the bully, weren't you?
Yeah.
Knew it. You totally seem the type.
There I was, my corduroys picking on people.
Right. I hear Jeff coming down the hall.
Along with better connecting with people, it feels right to use humor occasionally throughout any kind of story You know, I mean, you can read a Pride and Prejudice or just watch it on A&E. But something like that. There are moments of levity in these very serious, sort of over the top.
Yeah, take a look at all of your big dramas. And I mean, since
every classic drama, watch them and tell me you don't see humor.
Yeah, and we tend to focus on fantasies. Take a look at Game of Thrones, you know, Lord of the Rings, any one of these big things. There's always humor is as serious as, like, Game of Thrones is a great example because as serious as that show is, there's definitely stuff in that show is funny.
Oh, yeah. Oh, most definitely. And sometimes even the bad stuff is delivered in a way that's a little funny. The big thing with humor feeling right is if you're absent of it, you end up making the story humorless, which will lead me actually into my next point now, which is allows you to point out humorous characters. Some people don't have humor. And I know that's not why I put there. Some people do not have humor. There are people you met in real life that, at least around you, you've never seen an example of humor that you could understand from them. The classic one in fantasy, especially for gamers, is sort of the stereotype of a paladin. I'm holier than thou.
Very serious.
No, we must go smite those undead and blah, 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 which is typically why I think I usually played a rogue. But maybe that was me. But
by the strength of the foe hammer, you shall be avenged.
Yeah. The two things you can use with that in your story is the characters around him could actually derive humor from how serious, you know, that, like the line Michael just delivered there. The character would deliver that with the uttermost seriousness. And then you have like the group kind of snickering at the character because, come on.
Actually, I think the line is by the blood of the foe hammer, I think. But do you know what that's from? That's from Galaxy Quest.
Okay. I don't remember that.
By the blood of the foe
That was a fun
hammer,
movie. Yeah.
You shall be avenged. It's very serious.
Oh, very serious.
But
movie.
Very funny.
Yeah. I mean, I think Star Trek was a parody of that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Star Trek came well after. Galaxy Quest came out in like 54.
Yeah. Think of Star Trek.
Don't look that up on Wikipedia.
And if you do, and you think we're lying, remember that I'm a fiction writer and I lie.
And that people edit those things. So there's other fiction writers out there lying on Wikipedia.
That's where the internet lies.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, for supporting the story, you can use humor to help alleviate stress, to make really bad feelings occur to people. You know, think, for example, you know, you have these two people who, you know, they goofily meet at a grocery store, and it's sort of one of those love at first sight stories, and that's how it's building up.
Meet cute, as it's referred to.
What's it called?
A meet cute is as it's referred to in
meet cute.
Yeah, meet cute is when you've got the boy in the no. No, MEET.
Oh, okay.
When the boy meets girl and they have a cute little initial interaction in a movie, that's called a meet cute.
Exactly. So you start a movie off in that direction and you start playing along where you have these scenes of them out together, the relationship growing very close, you know, very quickly. And all of a sudden you realize, oh my goodness, she has cancer. And now,
so really funny.
So now the story shifts into this tough thing, you know, where these two people are struggling through this, but you feel more attachment to them already because of the sort of cute humor at the beginning. And then, and so the tension builds as she's fighting the cancer, and he's staying with her and they're working together. And then at the moment she gets, you know, her first test showing that she is cancer free, they laugh, they go out, they have a great time. And when they're going back on the parking lot, he gets hit by a car and dies.
Which movie is this? I want to watch this.
I don't know. There are probably movies with
I'm sure there are movies like that. Well, see, I just thought of one, but I can't share it because you just totally laid out.
I ruined a movie.
You ruined a movie, but you didn't, because I won't mention it now.
Okay.
Because if I mention it, there's no need to watch it.
You have to. And that's the thing to remember too when you're writing stories. The themes of your stories have been told before.
Yes, and will be told again.
They were all told by the time I think it was Aristotle said there are no new plots, and that was like blah 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 BC.
Yeah.
And he was right then. The plots, the themes aren't unique. It's the way, it's the delivery.
It's the delivery system.
Yeah.
The only thing that we get new these days, you get all these plot devices. They're all old, but I like it when we manage to come up with new. We get the most common thing that seems new is technology.
Yeah.
Like when The Matrix came, everyone was like, whoa, this is like, no one's told a story like this before. And I was like, are you kidding me? I'm like,
Have you read the Bible?
Well, no, not even that. I was like the idea of being immersed in a virtual reality.
Oh, okay. That part of it.
I was like, this is an old concept. I'm like, I was introduced to this in a philosophy class when I was in high school. And this was, and the philosophy had come up with it like more than 100 years prior. Like the idea of us being in.
And the best fiction ever delivered that way that I know of is, I think it's called A Crack in Time by Philip K. Dick, which, just forewarning, if you read his books, Blade Runner was a pretty shallow movie in comparison to the book Android, or Blade Runner, which was originally called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Yeah, Do Androids Dream. Well, and those are two different things.
Well, it was actually, they changed the name to Blade Runner when the movie came out.
No, I know that, but Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is one, and you were just referencing another.
The other one I was referencing, I believe, was A Crack in Time.
A Crack in Time, there.
By Philip K. Dick. And that movie was sort of, it had the depth and intelligence kind of pulled out, but delivered a pretty good emotional story in The Truman Show.
Wow. Yeah.
But it was not near, once again, it didn't have the depth, it didn't have the stakes of A Crack in Time. But the whole thing was, this entire world was created to fool one person. And it was a powerful story, because sometimes you feel like that jerk too,
Like, is this all on me?
I know. Am I like a joke for the world?
Am I a cosmic, like, am I the punchline?
Yeah. If you ever want your brain screwed with, read Philip K. Dick. Really. I mean, anything by him. It was, unfortunately, he died young, but, his brain, his books, it's like you read Blade Runner and you realize what the movie lost out on, because you're like, it's this battle between, really, it gets to a point where you're like, I don't know if I'm real. And who hasn't had that moment where I must be an alien or some other kind of creature? But
watch the movie Ex Machina.
Yeah. There's
some really great questioning, like, wait a minute, if this is this, am I the simulation?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm being tested, not the other way around.
Yeah. And one of the great ironies is, a lot of times when people think they come up with something new, there's probably a name created by Aristotle to explain it.
Yeah, probably.
So don't worry about your plots being new. Don't worry about your story being original. Worry about the characterizations, the interactions. That's what's going to be appealing to people. And they buy genres for a reason, because they like the genre. And if you make it too alien to the genre, it's maybe technically something we would call a new genre, but it might not have the audience the old genre had. It could be better or worse, who knows? I would be remiss if I do not mention the jester character, the fool character from Shakespeare. This is the classic character archetype that represents everything that we're talking about today. Shakespeare would use a character, a jester or fool. It would be a common person who was meant to bring levity to his shows, which were typically high dramas between nobles who were battling and doing bad things to each other. And then the jester character would come in. He would usually, in his foolishness, outwit the characters in the book and make them look foolish, because he somehow could outwit them, even though he was obviously a less superior person, at least in his interactions. And he would actually use it to a lot of times deliver wisdom to the audience, about what's really happening, about the machinations. He could deliver a little wisdom to the audience through the humor as well too. So I believe all of his plays have this character. You can have that character, and you don't need that character to do it. If you want natural, dialogue, which is something I hear people complain about all the time. Remember, people joke a lot, different people at different levels in different ways. So just in conversation, you can deliver humor. timing is a great way to deliver humor too. It's
all on the timing.
The knight comes in to save the damsel and she's on the toilet. There's a little bit of humor with that. So your classic.
What book did you read that had that?
There's probably one.
I think we might know a couple of people who may have written that.
I know people capable of writing
I know a couple that are capable of writing that.
And could make it brilliant.
Just a moment. No, I'm busy. I just slayed the dragon. Open the door. Just a minute.
Or conversely, you have the Python or the Monty Python moment where Lancelot goes through slaughtering an entire castle to go save the maiden, and he goes up and busts into the room and realizes it's a guy. Whoops! Oh, so sorry. Didn't mean to bother you.
No, take me with you.
Yeah. So,
it's like in a very real and legal way. I've not so much as lost a son, I've gained a daughter. He's going to make it.
Not dead.
And then suddenly died. When kills the king.
Or the son or whatever.
Right.
That is all from The Quest of the Holy Grail. Some of those quotes might have actually been from some of the other movies too.
Couple maybe, yeah.
Or they've been repeated in other movies as well. But check out The Quest for the Holy Grail. That's the reason why they have the genre in fantasy gaming called, they call it a Monty Hall game. So.
Monty Hall game? What are you talking about?
Just where it's completely over the top silly. I don't know. Maybe I'll just cut that out.
I
thought I've heard the term before, so
I don't think I've heard it before. That's why I'm just curious.
Just the slapstick kind of game, and maybe it's actually referencing something else. But when I see the word Monty or Python,
you just said Monty
Python,
Monty
Hall.
But you said Monty Hall.
Yeah, so which is why I staggered there.
He was a game show host, wasn't he?
But it was kind of the same idea where it was kind of crazy, over the top humor. So I think I completely missed that reference until right now.
We'll have to look that one up just to figure that out. Maybe if one of us had the wealth of the internet before us, we could do that.
Computers, how?
Jeff and I are literally sitting here at the table. There are 3 laptops all open in front of us. I've got my
There's so many laptops.
Here.
The mixing board is actually.
You've got your phone over there. We literally have 5 devices within arm's reach. We could qualify. We could look up this information, but we're not going to. Moving on.
So really, the thing to remember is, whether you're using moments, little scenes that are meant to lighten the story, or you're using subplots within the story to have a thread that's connecting things together, but in a more humorous way to bring it all together at the end. No matter how you're doing it, the most important thing any story has is just natural humor intermixed to it. You will never reach the dramatic heights in a story without making people at least giggle once in a while. You have to, like Michael said, you need a bit of a roller coaster. And in that roller coaster, sometimes if you build up way too much tension and you're like, I'm in chapter 4, you need to bring it down a lot. If you build up a little bit of tension over time, you need to bring it back down a little bit every moment. The trend of the tension's increasing. So like if you'd see a line like in a math class, you would see the line of tension, it would look straight, the average change. But if you looked at the real change, it would go above and below that line throughout the story until it reached the climax, at which point it would fall off quickly.
And understand, like getting back to what you just said a few moments ago about that real people, real dialogue, people, there's always characters, and I'm going to use that as when you're referring to a person like, oh, you're such a character. There's always people out there that will say really funny stuff at inappropriate moments. I'm going to give a really good real world example. I won't use names to protect
me,
not you. I had a moment in my life where, well, actually, we'll go further back because it makes it even easier to understand. When I was in high school, this close friend of mine and I always had this ability to laugh at ourselves. We would step outside of our situation, look inside at ourselves, and point and laugh, because it was usually a miserable experience that would be really funny if it was happening to somebody else. so we'd step outside ourselves.
If you could do that,
yes.
What a great advantage.
So metaphorically, we would step outside ourselves, look at our circumstance, laugh about it, and get over it. And that would be the thing that would help. It was like a protection. It was a way for us to break the levity in our own life.
That's right.
Instead of just,
Jeffrey took our lunch money again.
Instead of yeah. Well, usually it was more so serious. So cut to later in life where his mother died rather tragically. And I was living far away at the time, and I was very close to his mom. Like I stopped by their house on Mother's Day, and gave her a card, along with a few other friends of mine's moms. And I had no means to get home to go to the funeral.
Yeah.
And I didn't see him again for 6 to 8 months. And it was the first time something so significant had happened in our friend's circle.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know how he was going to handle it and how he was going to be talking about that subject. But I was curious to know how he was. And again, this is somebody we always talked about really harsh and heavy, deep, painful, emotional stuff with a bit of levity.
Yeah.
So I'm eggshelling around the subject. I'm trying to ask him without flat asking him.
Yeah.
And I'm tiptoeing around the subject, and he's not picking up. I found out later that he was. But he's not picking up what I want from him. Okay. And I finally have to ask, so how's everything with your mother? Just like that. And it's quiet for about half a second. And he goes, well, she's still dead, And I was like, you're such a jerk. Like, do you have any idea how hard it was for me to ask that question? And he's like, I know. I wanted you to ask that question. He was totally picking up on my cues, but he wanted to make me suffer through it. So that built the tension. And then after I asked the question, he alleviated all of it with breaking the levity of saying, well, she's still dead, And I'm like, well, really, what's going on? He's like, well, it's tough on my sister and my dad and blah, blah, blah. But the point is that real people talk that way.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say everyone, because I'd like to think that he and I are pretty unique individuals. But, we had that conversation.
Yeah. And
so no matter what the subject is in the book,
the details will be different, depending on the characters involved, but it will always happen. And there will always be that guy who's from Brooklyn in a war movie, who always jokes at every moment, because they exist. They're actual characters in life that show up. If you don't have those kind of characters, you're taking away from your fantasy story by not making it real enough.
Yeah, that works. Yeah, that works.
Okay.
And if it doesn't, you're a fiction writer.
I was just lying.
And you lie. All right. The bonus of actually, why don't you read the bonus there?
All right,
because I can't.
I did come up with a special bonus today for this episode.
Yeah.
One,
and you worded it kind of weird for me to read it aloud.
Yeah, it's really meant more for me to say.
Okay, so go for it.
So, and this is a very important thing to keep in mind. This is a special bonus you can only get here on the World Builders.
On the World Builders.
Whatever the heck the show's called.
What's the show called?
I should just call it The Show. But that was probably taken.
Or this show.
The bonus is make sure to use humor in your stories, because the more humor you use, the less stress, which allows readers to live longer. And if they read longer, they can buy more of your books. So use it to help sell books.
And plus, if your readers are a lot of low stress people, then you don't need as many of them because they'll be around to buy other stuff too.
Exactly. So he buys 2 or 3 extra books before he's gone. Take advantage.
Yeah, and maybe he's out there, he or she, your avatar, is out there going, you know what? This is such a good book, and it breaks my levity. I'm going to share it with my stressed out friend. So it's like everybody's chill and buying all your stuff, and that's what we want.
Of course, it's about a psychopathic killer who's horribly mutilated the town, and 2 of the survivalists are joking the whole way through it.
Yeah, of course. And they're constantly targeting chilled out people. So,
and let me point out, the big problem with survival movies, all of these zombie things out there, is too many characters are humorless. And the thing is, in that kind of circumstance, there'd actually probably be a little more humor because life would suck that bad.
Yeah. I mean, there's like almost no joking in The Walking Dead.
Yeah, which is a problem.
And I love the show. I'm not knocking the show for that, but I would think in that with those, even with that group of characters, that there would be a lot more levity. And
they use humor in weird ways there, where it's like, it's the moment at which the person finally gets it. That's the little sly humor to release. But they're only trying to release a tad of tension, which is what their goal is to do.
Did you see?
I just think it's very unrealistic for a zombie apocalypse. That's all.
There was an episode not too long ago where they had severed multiple heads of zombies because they were trying to match that head to a living person and fool some people into thinking that they had killed the living person. And they're like, this one is pretty close. It kind of looks like him. And then
there was that moment there. Yeah.
One of the characters picks it up and starts punching the severed head in the face. And he's like, there you go. It's like he got in a fight now. And you can just justify it that you had to punch him a few times before cutting his head off. So they broke the tension a teeny bit.
Yeah.
But it was kind of one of those moments where it's like,
that's how they deliver it.
But you kind of wanted to laugh, but you're also like, this is really messed up.
Yeah.
So as opposed to, great movie, good movie.
World War Z?
No, Very Bad Things. The thing with the movie Very Bad Things is that a lot of people, when that movie was released, at least everybody that was watching it in the theater that I saw it in, didn't understand that it is a black comedy. It is meant to be funny, but it is delivered in a way that is not. Except for certain moments. There are certain moments that clearly you're meant to laugh.
Yeah.
Well, there's a moment in the middle of the movie where something horrific happens. I mean, it's horrific. Like if it were real, it's one of the worst things I've ever seen. And I laughed so hard out loud in the theater because it was hysterical.
Yeah.
I was the only one in a crowded New York City movie theater laughing. Everybody around me turned to me and looked at me like I was a psycho nut job. And I was like, you just don't get the joke.
That's right.
Like you're not getting it. Like this is meant to be funny.
Just because you don't get it doesn't mean it's not funny.
Exactly.
Which actually it kind of
does. Sometimes it makes it funnier because in that moment I felt like that joke was just for me.
That's right.
So, what's the world builder task of the day?
The world builder task of the day. Find a very dark story that you've written and add bits of humor to it. Read through it and kind of find logical steps in it where it starts to feel like you're not getting as much tension build up, and add just a little bit of humor, whether it's punching a severed head in your face, or you're opening up a severed head in between your hands and having it say, "Hey, guys, I think I'm hurt."
They did that they did that exact thing in the very same episode with the same head.
I have to credit that to one of my friends. He did it years ago.
Well, the thing that I can attest to too. You don't watch The Walking Dead, right?
I watched the first 2 seasons.
Right. My point is, though, you would not have seen the episode I'm referring to because it's quite recent.
Yeah.
So,
but that was actually I did steal that scene from our friend Famous Dave. He actually did that in a game we were playing with. Actually, it was a Storyteller Werewolf game, and he was in full what they call Krynos form, which is like your half man, half werewolf form for people who haven't played. And he stuck the head of a guard around a corner with his claws over the top of the head, the bottom of the head, and was talking to the other guards and said that, which I've lost. I've never forgotten that moment. It was a wonderful moment. And then they stole it from him because
they must have. It's kind of an old joke, Jeff. You're just talking about puppeteering at that point.
But it's funnier with like claws.
Yeah, and a human head. Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely. So what's the real world task of the day? So
once you've found that story.
Oh, actually, I have something to add on that too. So if you don't have a story like that, then just sit down and write a short story, like a 1-page, 2-3-page short story, make it dark purposefully, and then add humor to it or add a little humor in as you go.
Yeah, exactly. Share out that text. And this is still back in the world builder task here. Share out the text to your beta readers in both forms and get their feedback and say, which version did you find more frightening? Now, if it's a long novel, don't give them 2 novels, but give them like sections of it just to test out to see where are they at tension wise before and after. And now for the real world task of the day,
which is,
go egg Michael's car.
Wait, no,
you and I will laugh so much.
No.
Me and the guests can laugh then and have a lot of humor, and we'll live much longer.
I thought like us helping them live longer was like by influencing them to go seek out the media that will make them laugh, or subsequently creating it on their own, not destroying my property.
I mean, if you wash it off quick, it shouldn't be a problem. Okay.
Have you ever seen me wash my car? You've seen my cars for years. Not very clean. Anyway, what about the tease? You got a tease for the next episode?
Yes. The tease for the next episode is preventing a world apocalypse. And now there's a plural for it, which we can't agree upon. So I've come up with a new one. It is apocalypsi.
Yeah, I liked apocali, though.
Apocali was nice, but it sounds too much like broccoli.
Not really.
No.
So the next episode is going to be preventing a world apocalypse, which I don't think anyone should ever do.
And as always, make sure to go to gardul.com. That's GARDUL.com for the show notes. It'll be under podcasting, World Builders Anvil. That's a great place to get all of the information from the episode that you've just listened to and to see all the resources that we've talked about in this episode. Thanks for joining us in this episode of the World Builders Anvil. Please be sure to rate and review us in iTunes, and please help get the word out to your friends about our show. And join me, Jeffrey W. Ingram at Gardul.com, to see the progress of my world and learn why I made the choices I did. And please contact me and let me know the topics you would love to hear in the future. Now strike, while the myth rolls high.